For decades, a silent revolution was brewing in laboratories across the globe, one that would eventually upend everything we thought we knew about ourselves. Scientists embarked on an unprecedented mission, trekking into the deepest reaches of the Amazon rainforest, navigating the vast, windswept Mongolian steppes, and visiting isolated island communities in the Pacific. They weren't just looking for general data. They were hunting for the very blueprint of humanity. By sequencing millions of genetic markers and building the largest database of human diversity ever conceived, these researchers finally prepared to answer the question that has defined and divided civilization for centuries. What they discovered was so fundamentally transformative that it didn't just make headlines, it sent shockwaves through the scientific community, leading some researchers to initially believe their high-tech sequencing equipment was malfunctioning. The data revealed patterns that no one had predicted and connections that shattered the very concept of race as a biological reality. This journey into our collective past truly began in the early 1990s with the Human Genome Diversity Project. At the time, the goal was as controversial as it was ambitious: to capture the genetic essence of indigenous populations before the tides of globalization could wash away their unique signatures. While critics questioned the ethics of the project, supporters argued it was an essential race against time. The study eventually spanned the globe, collecting samples from over 1,000 individuals representing 52 distinct populations across 7 major geographic regions, including Africa, Europe, the Middle East, Central Asia, East Asia, Oceania, and the Americas. Using advanced technology capable of reading millions of genetic letters in a single session, scientists generated petabytes of data, enough to fill entire server farms. But when the numbers were finally crunched, the first revelation was a staggering blow to traditional thinking. The genetic differences between what we call races were almost non-existent. To put this into perspective, consider 2 people standing side by side, one from Beijing and one from Stockholm. To the naked eye, they appear fundamentally different. Different skin tones, different hair textures, and unique facial structures. However, if you zoom into their DNA, the shocking truth is revealed. They share 99.9% of their genetic code. That tiny remaining 0.1% is where all the variation we see across the globe resides. And it turns out that this 0.1% doesn't care about our social labels. The analysis proved that traditional racial categories have almost no basis in actual genetics. In fact, the data showed that a person from East Africa might share more genetic similarities with someone from Southern Europe than they do with someone from West Africa. The neat biological boxes we've used to categorize humanity for hundreds of years simply do not exist in the double helix of our DNA. But the most profound discovery, the one that truly rewrote the history books, centered on the African continent. Researchers found that the greatest genetic diversity on Earth exists within Africa, not between different continents. This means that 2 individuals from neighboring villages in Ethiopia could be more genetically different from each other than a random Ethiopian is from a random Norwegian. This isn't just a statistical fluke. It is a direct reflection of our evolutionary journey. Modern humans originated in Africa roughly 300,000 years ago. And for the vast majority of that time, our ancestors stayed put. During those hundreds of thousands of years, populations mixed, separated, and accumulated a massive wealth of genetic variation. Essentially, the genetic diversity of the entire rest of the world is just a small subset of the diversity that already existed in Africa before anyone ever left. To understand why the rest of the world looks so uniform compared to Africa, scientists point to a phenomenon known as the founder effect. Imagine you have a bag filled with 100 different colored marbles, representing the total genetic diversity found in Africa. Now, imagine you reach in and randomly grab only 15 marbles to start a new collection in a different room. No matter how much those 15 marbles multiply or change over time, that second bag will never possess the same level of variety as the original 100. This is exactly what happened when small groups of humans migrated out of Africa about 70,000 years ago. They carried only a fraction of humanity's total genetic palette with them. As these pioneers moved further away, their genetic diversity continued to shrink. The data confirms this. European populations show less diversity than those in the Middle East, and Native American populations, having traveled the furthest across the Bering Land Bridge, show the least genetic diversity of all. Perhaps most surprising is that the traits we fixate on the most, the visible markers of race like skin color and facial features, are controlled by less than 0.1% of our total genome. These traits, which have been used to justify centuries of systemic discrimination and conflict, represent a negligible fraction of who we are. Furthermore, these physical differences are incredibly new in the context of human history. For instance, the mutation for light skin in European populations only appeared about 8,000 years ago, and blue eyes emerged as recently as 6,000 to 10,000 years ago, likely originating from a single ancestor near the Black Sea. These are surface-level, blink-of-an-eye adaptations to local environments, like sun exposure or cold winds, and they have nothing to do with the complex internal traits that actually matter. While we were obsessing over skin-deep differences, we missed the fact that the genes governing the truly complex aspects of being human, things like metabolic efficiency, brain development, and immune system function, show massive variation within every group. You cannot predict someone's intelligence, athletic talent, or health risks based on their appearance, because those genes are distributed randomly across all human populations. The research further demolished the idea of ancestral purity. The data shows that most people are a genetic mosaic. A person identifying as Chinese may have Central Asian markers, while someone identifying as European likely carries Middle Eastern ancestry. This isn't just a result of modern travel. Humans have been mixing and migrating since the very beginning. Ancient DNA studies have revealed that even the people we think of as indigenous to a region are often the result of multiple waves of migration. For example, modern Europeans are a blend of at least 3 distinct groups: early farmers from Anatolia, indigenous hunter-gatherers, and herders from the Eurasian steppes. None of these groups were pure. They were already mixtures of even earlier populations. This pattern repeats everywhere, from Pacific Islanders to the Han Chinese population, which is actually a genetic mixture of northern and southern groups that merged over millennia. The genomic analysis is clear. There has never been a pure race. Human variation is a continuous spectrum, not a series of hard-edged categories. While the genetic evidence clearly shows our fundamental unity, it leaves us with a burning question. If we are 99.9% identical, why do we look so different? The answer lies in the incredible power of environmental adaptation. As human populations spread across the globe, they encountered radically different climates, altitudes, and levels of sun exposure. Natural selection acted like a sculptor, molding our physical features to help us survive in these specific conditions. For example, dark skin evolved as a vital shield against intense ultraviolet radiation near the equator, while light skin emerged in northern latitudes to allow for better vitamin D synthesis where sunlight is scarce. Even the epicanthic fold found in East Asian populations likely served a practical purpose, potentially protecting the eyes from the harsh glare of snow or biting cold winds. This process revealed a fascinating phenomenon known as convergent evolution. This is the scientific reason why populations in southern India and Aboriginal Australians both evolved dark skin. Despite being geographically separated and genetically distinct, they didn't inherit the trait from a recent common ancestor. Rather, their environments forced their biology to arrive at the same solution through different genetic pathways. It is exactly like how dolphins and sharks both evolved streamlined bodies and fins. One is a mammal, and the other a fish, but the demands of the ocean force them into the same physical shape. Our physical race markers are simply the tools our ancestors used to survive their specific corners of the earth. The data further shows that many traits we assume are racial are actually tied to culture and lifestyle. Take the ability to digest milk as an adult. This trait isn't found in a single race. Instead, it appears in Northern Europeans, East African pastoralists, and certain Central Asian communities, all groups that historically raised dairy cattle. Meanwhile, it's largely absent in other African and East Asian groups. Similarly, populations living at extreme elevations, like those in the Himalayas and the Andes, have both evolved unique genetic ways to process oxygen more efficiently. They arrived at the same survival goal through completely different genetic mutations because they adapted independently to the challenge of thin air. One of the most dangerous myths the DNA results debunked is the idea that certain diseases are racial. While conditions like sickle cell anemia are more common in West African populations, the data proves this isn't because of their race, but because of their environment. The sickle cell mutation actually provides a survival advantage against malaria, which was a major threat in that region. You find the same resistance genes in Southern Europeans from historically malarious areas, proving that these traits are local evolutionary responses to specific threats, not indicators of a biological race. This is why modern genetics warns that using race as a shortcut for medical risk is not only inaccurate, but potentially dangerous. If biology doesn't support the idea of race, where did it come from? The genomic record points to a sobering truth. The concept of distinct human races was manufactured in the 1700s and 1800s. European scientists of that era tried to classify humans the same way they did plants, but they baked their own prejudices into the system. They created hierarchies to justify colonialism, slavery, and genocide, claiming that physical differences reflected innate levels of intelligence or morality. Modern DNA analysis has completely dismantled these hierarchies, proving that the visible traits early race scientists fixated on have zero correlation with a person's worth, talent, or potential. Perhaps the most mind-blowing revelation from the data is just how closely we are all related in time. Scientists found that the most recent common ancestor for every person alive today lived only about 3,000 years ago. If you go back just 7,000 years, every person living then who has descendants today is an ancestor to all 8 billion of us. Whether they were farmers in the Yellow River Valley or hunter-gatherers in southern Africa, their blood flows through your veins and the veins of everyone you meet. There is no such thing as a pure ancestral lineage. We are all part of a massive, interconnected web that encompasses the entire human family tree. Ultimately, comparing the DNA of every corner of the earth has proven that race is a social construct, not a biological reality. We invented these categories to divide ourselves and then tried to claim the DNA backed us up. The science now confirms that human variation is a continuous, beautiful spectrum where populations blend into one another without clear borders. Beneath the surface-level adaptations that help us handle the sun, the cold, or the altitude, we are a single species with a shared history and a common future. The shocking result of this global DNA comparison is a powerful call to move past the destructive fiction of biological race and recognize the reality of our shared humanity. The traditional image of our ancestry as a neat, linear tree with separate branches for every race has been completely dismantled by the data. Instead of a tree, the DNA reveals a sprawling, interconnected web that ignores the borders we've drawn on maps. One of the most stunning revelations came from the Americas, where scientists found that some Native American populations carry genetic markers linked to Aboriginal Australians and Papua New Guineans. This finding suggests that human migration was far more chaotic and adventurous than a simple trek across the Bering Land Bridge. It hints at ancient connections across vast oceanic distances that we are only beginning to understand. We see this same pattern of genetic layering in Europe. Genomic analysis of ancient skeletons revealed that modern Europeans are not the direct descendants of the original hunter-gatherers who first settled the continent. Instead, they are a complex genetic cocktail. Roughly 9,000 years ago, a massive wave of farmers from Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, moved in, largely replacing the original inhabitants. Then, about 5,000 years ago, another surge arrived, pastoralists from the Eurasian steppes, known as the Yamnaya. Every European today is a blend of these distinct groups, none of whom would have identified as European at the time. The data proves that what we consider a race is often just a snapshot of a temporary mixture of earlier, diverse populations. This reality is even more pronounced in East Asia. The Han Chinese population, often viewed from the outside as a monolithic racial group, actually harbors massive genetic variation that rivals the diversity of the entire European continent. The genomic record shows a thousands of years-long process of northern and southern populations merging through imperial expansion and cultural unification. To categorize over 1 billion people as a single race is to ignore a wealth of genetic history hidden beneath surface-level similarities. The data is clear: human variation is a continuous spectrum, and whenever we try to draw a hard line between groups, the DNA shows those lines are purely imaginary. This is why the scientific community is sounding an urgent alarm about the use of race in medicine. For too long, race has been used as a proxy for genetic risk, but the study proves this is medically dangerous. A doctor who assumes a patient has a specific risk just because of their skin color is making a guess based on 0.1% of their genome, while ignoring the other 99.9%. The data shows that two people categorized as the same race could have completely different disease susceptibilities based on where their ancestors lived and the specific environmental pressures they faced. True precision medicine requires looking at an individual's actual DNA, not the social category they've been placed in. The most mind-bending part of this global comparison is the timeline of our connection. We often think of ancient ancestors as being separated from us by hundreds of thousands of years, but the math of our DNA tells a different story. Scientists discovered that our most recent common ancestor lived only about 3,000 years ago. If you go back just 7,000 years, every person alive then who has any living descendants today is an ancestor to every single one of the 8 billion people on Earth. Whether they were farming in the Yellow River Valley, hunting in the Amazon, or building in Mesopotamia, their genetic legacy is present in every human being alive right now. This realization obliterates the concept of purity. No one can claim a pure ancestral lineage because we all descend from the same pool of ancestors in the very recent past. Any identity we feel toward one specific ancient group is a result of cultural transmission, not biological exclusivity. The DNA proves that we are a single, restless species that has been mixing, migrating, and adapting together since the very beginning. While the biology of race is a myth, the social reality of racism is not. The scientists emphasize that understanding race isn't genetic, doesn't erase the centuries of history where these categories were used to distribute power and resources unequally. The disparities we see in health, wealth, and opportunity today aren't the result of natural biological differences. They are the result of social systems built on a fiction. By comparing the DNA of every corner of the Earth, we haven't just discovered our past. We've been given the tools to dismantle the pseudoscientific walls that have divided us for far too long. The results didn't just shock the world. They gave us a definitive evidence that we are, and have always been, one human family.